Today, we have a really interesting young gentleman, done some pretty spectacular things on the ATP Tour. He's, of course, going to be in all of your minds with the spectacular couple of runs he's had at the Australian Opens, most notably this year, and that spectacular match against Roger Federer. Here's a good look at the man, Tennys Sandgren. You can see he's had some pretty amazing wins. Fabio Fognini, a good run in Newport. UTR continuing to move up all the way through. And you'll notice also his UTR has always been higher than his ranking in those years where he wasn't as high as possibly he should have been due to the amount of match wins and decisiveness of those wins, but a really good indicator of tennis's true level, which obviously he's risen to now, well above 15 in his UTR. So let's bring the man out, Mr. Tennys, perfectly named Sandgren. Tennys, how are you?
Yo, Prakash, how's it going?
What was your trajectory like? Did it take you a while to break out, or were you just, sort of always at the top of the rankings?
No, I definitely wasn't. 12s and 14s, I was, not bad. I was probably in the teens in my section, in the Southern section, and nationally. I don't think I was ever seeded at national tournaments, like the big national tournaments. I don't think I was ever seeded in those events in the 14 and unders. And they always seemed overwhelming to me. You go to those big events and all the players would come together, and all the names that you'd see on like the ranking list, you're like, oh, that's that guy, and that's that guy. You wouldn't see them because you'd stay in your section. And then you'd see these players from different sections, and there'd always be different kind of variations of how people would play in different regions. Like SoCal guys always play better on the faster hard courts, and just like little things like that you'd be looking for. But then around 15, 16, I just started to really hit some improvement. Like I would just have some spikes of improvement, and you could say it was just a product of working hard, and it was an eventuality, or I'm not really sure what happened exactly, but all of a sudden I just started playing better tennis. And by the end of my 16 and under career, I think I won clay courts in Kalamazoo back to back. And 2007, when I was 15 turning 16, was kind of my junior breakout year. It was kind of a year where I just took it an extra couple steps up and had some great tournaments. And I still remember winning 16th Kalamazoo, and that was super special. But I think that year was kind of the first year where it was like, okay, I think all the hard work is actually starting to come through.
Obviously took you from that age, winning Kalamazoo. That's a big success. Now you took it international, managed to get into the top 10 in the world, but you still made a conscious decision not to go pro at that time, and you actually went to college.
I'd always heard that, your late teens and your 20s, that's where you set yourself up in your life. And so I didn't want to waste that. So it's like, okay, well, what can I do? So I decided to go to University of Tennessee, where my brother was a senior, and I started in the spring. And the goal was to try and win NCAAs with my brother, and then turn pro after that semester. And we were close, lost in the finals of NCAAs, and those darn Trojans got us with Steve Johnson and Daniel Lewan. It was a great year, great season of tennis. And I did the same thing. I played summer futures to see if I had improved and see if I was ready to turn pro. And that was kind of what I was hoping to be able to do, and just wasn't ready. So I decided to go back to school from there again.
What a diligent way of going about it. So the idea was always to go pro, but you wanted to make sure you were at that level. A lot of people prematurely jump into certain things, and you really took your time. What did you gain in college that transformed you from not necessarily getting out of those second rounds of the futures to obviously being a different player once you left Tennessee?
Right. I think developing my strengths and what I'm actually good at tennis, and I really developed a strong base, a good baseline of kind of my identity as a player, because it's one thing to be a good junior, and it's another thing entirely to start to transition that into adult tennis. And everybody's games they're a little different. So some of the younger guys have massive weapons, so it doesn't matter if they're not as physical. They've got a huge serve forehand, so they don't need to be as physical. Whereas I was struggling to win points on my own terms. But what I did gain in college was just an absolute strong physical base that I could pull from and be able to grind guys down and play long matches. And I could handle the heat well. And I wasn't phased by playing three setters, or I wasn't phased if I lost the first set, physically anyway. Emotionally is a different ballgame. But just kind of learning how to construct points around my game. And I don't know how much better I got necessarily at like ball striking while I was in college, but I learned I got a greater understanding of how to work hard and how to structure my days and what it would be like to go on tour and be professional. What does that look like? Because when you're a student athlete, you're working 2 full-time jobs essentially, and it's difficult to do both really well. You can, it's difficult. And so to try and manage that and juggle that, and then remove one of the aspects remove the school part, and then you can focus your time solely on just the tennis aspect. It's super helpful. I think you need to be able to ball strike at a certain level. Absolutely. But the quicker you shed the idea that ball striking is the most important aspect of the tennis day in, day out, the quicker you can get into the things that actually really matter. And the mental side of it is something you can control. And it's something that is way more important than how you hit the ball on the strings. Even if you're down, the odds are against you, but your best chance is if you stay calm and you stay focused and you keep believing in yourself and you keep believing in your game. And if you don't do those things, well, yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're freaking out that you're going to lose, and you're probably going to lose because you're freaking out. So you probably should not do that. And, the idea that you probably shouldn't hold on to it so tightly that you end up with this death grip and you just want to win. And it's like, well, sometimes it's just not about that at that point. It's about how well you can handle the cards that you have at the time. Just being accountable to myself. Like if I got in a good day's work, I felt good. And if I didn't, I felt like something was missing. I felt like I left something on the table, and I don't like that feeling. I've never liked that feeling. And sometimes it doesn't help sometimes because you do too much. You can overtrain, you can do too much, but people would tell me that. And so then I would take that into account. They'd be like, I'd be more likely to hear you probably need to take a few rest days rather than you need to be working harder. So when somebody on the outside would be like, hey, maybe take a day off here and there, it's like, okay, probably right. But that to me, that feeling of not doing enough always just left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And so I never wanted that. And so on the flip side, if I'd put in a hard day's work, that was the most satisfying thing I could do, really. One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten is, you don't know who you could be in 5 years' time. If you did all the little things right and you actually held yourself accountable, who could you be not in 2 weeks? That's too small of a time frame.
Right.
Who are you going to be in 5 years? Like that to me is you have no idea. That's the answer to that is you have absolutely no idea. You could be, incrementally better, which would be awesome. It's awesome to just be better at any level, or you could be playing, you could be going from 600 in the world to having match points on Roger on quarters of Australia and being, the smallest margin away from being in the semis. It's like, it's pretty cool. And you could be more than that. Who knows? You have no idea, but like, you won't know until you do it. And you don't know until you devote yourself and you're willing to put yourself out there enough and say, hey, I did all I could. And potentially it could not be enough. You could lose doing everything you could do possible, and just being okay with that. You have to understand that you won't necessarily remember the triumphs that you had or these matches that you win or lost, but you'll remember like the mindsets that you had and how you treated yourself and how you treated other people. And what did you do day to day to be better? And what kind of lessons and what kind of habits did you try to instill, or what kind of negative things did you adopt that maybe you shouldn't have? And those kinds of things really matter. But the outcome stuff is what I mean when I say just relax. Like, don't worry so much about the outcome stuff. Do your best and be passionate and want to do well. But it's not this end all be all thing, whether you win or lose certain matches.